welcome to an episode of the Roundup True Crime with Mike. I'm here with a panel today, and we are discussing the Ashley Benefield case. If you haven't been paying attention, the trial pretty much almost ended today. We have a few more speakers, a few more witnesses tomorrow that are going to finish out. We'll get the finishing the jury instructions, and then we're going to get the closing arguments before it hands off to the jury. So I brought these friends of mine all together to talk about this case and what we think is going to happen and how fast or what the decision is going to be. I think several of you guys have already made up your minds, and I'm still closed. So let's start off with everybody introducing themselves. I think I've had everybody on my show at one of the times. So for everybody, we'll start with Lydia. If you want to give a quick introduction.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. It's good to be here. I'm a fan of two of the people on tonight, both podcasts, Jayson
And
and
Anna. So
Mike. Yeah. And Anna's
Proof that you
upcoming
have
podcast.
bad taste, at least with one of them.
We met through the prosecutors podcast. That's how we all kind of got together. I work in a couple of different industries, so true crime is just a hobby of mine, has been since I read Helter Skelter in 4th grade. And it's just fun to talk about these cases, especially like tonight when we don't all agree. So I really look forward to that, and everybody's opinions here are welcome.
Okay, Anna, you're next.
My name's Anna, much like Lydia, just with a group of my friends, two excellent podcasters here with us, and then Lydia and I being the dark jurors of the group. I work in accounting. True crime is just an interest of mine. I think I probably got my start back when the satanic panic was happening in the early 80s, and my mom was just constantly worried that I was going to get kidnapped and, sacrificed in a demon ritual. So,
well, that's why you have the cereal gun and the laundry gun.
The bacon gun. Later. Don't forget the bacon gun.
The bacon gun. Jayson, you're up next. Even though almost everybody already knows you.
I don't know. I'm going to beat that. So, Jayson Blair. I am the host of a podcast called Silver Linings Handbook. I also work as a mental health coach. My interest in true crime came from actual crime. I had moved to the Washington, D.C. area as a freshman in high school. And, I remember this one kid, you're a freshman in high school. Not a lot of people are particularly nice to you, but this one kid named Winford Martin was super nice to me. And then the winter of our sophomore year, he was actually in this nice leafy suburb in Northern Virginia. On a snowy day, he was taken out into a field in a rural area and shot along with his cousin in the back of the head. And that was my first big story for the high school newspaper. So over time, I had several different hats as a court and crime reporter. And so I've always had an interest in following crime. And then during the pandemic, I really sort of took to podcasts. I found Kevin and Anya from The Murder Sheet, Brett and Alice. And then since then have really found a great sense of community in the true crime space. So and Mike, you are also one of my favorite people within the group. I love having conversations with you, whether it's on your show or whether it's in private conversations, because I think you are so thoughtful and so unbiased and just sort of sometimes say the things that nobody's willing to say. So I appreciate all of that.
Oh, thank you. I guess my story is, I started, my oldest one had to take and listen to Serial for a high school English class. And I'm the one that still listened to it, and he got bored with it pretty quickly, but I got addicted to that one. And then I met some really great friends on that, I still talk to and talk about that case all the time. And I'm still waiting for that decision on that. I think releasing him was wrong, but that's for a different case. Okay, let's go ahead, and since normally I spend about 5 or 10 minutes talking about what happened today in court, I guess, as I kind of joke, when we watched the Karen Reed trial, we'd get 1 or 2 witnesses per day. And today it looks like we got, if I can count, got to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 witnesses. So quite remember them all, but let's start with Dr. Ferris. He is a domestic violence slash, I guess, IPV expert. I guess he is a counselor. One of the things he brought on, and some of you guys can kind of talk about it too, is the power, or kind of the wheel of power in domestic violence. Can't remember the term, and it had several areas that talk about his kind of speciality is kind of what somebody that's either the abuser in domestic violence, or someone that's a part of domestic violence, what kind of happens in those relationships. So the problem, and I kind of talked about it a little bit yesterday, or on Friday on my thing, was he going to talk about Ashley and whether how she did in this, and what she felt in this situation, or just hypotheticals. And as we heard today, he talked more in hypotheticals. So he talked about how an abused person might react to their abuser. They might be one thing in public, while at the same time they might give a different thing on it. So I think that was where he came out. Unfortunately, so he supposedly talked to Ashley for 15 or 20 hours, but he never gave his expert opinion on whether he thought she was abused or not. That is kind of one of the weird things, that he never said anything more. But we'll talk about somebody else that talked about that a little bit more. But that's kind of where what he said today. I don't think there was too much on cross. Anybody want to add anything about that witness before we move on?
I just want to point out that for anybody that's watching the trial and sees his testimony, he used a dated wheel. The wheel has really been removed. Gender's been removed from it. The accepted power and control wheel that's being used in intimate partner violence situations is really non-gendered. My personal belief is that they use the gendered one that makes it seem like men are the only abusers on purpose. Other people can come to that decision if they want to or disagree with me, but just for anybody that's watching this and happens to watch the trial, just know that that's a bit of an outdated wheel that they were using.
Yeah, oh, Anna, sorry. I was just going to say, I think anybody who has covered crime or been a cop or done anything like that knows that, abuse comes from every gender, every race, every, creed, religion, occupation. And I thought that was an interesting touch too. But
I thought I have a little different take from Anna. We both reacted to that wheel the exact same way. We were like, what? King of the castle? So only women are abused? What are you talking about? We just went through Karen Reed. We know that men are in coercive control relationships. This is ridiculous. But what I took a little bit differently from Anna is, in my opinion, them using that wheel, I hope it wasn't deliberate, because it would immediately alienate women, I think. My take was, you're going to look at what this older man is bringing in as evidence, and you're going to say this is a misogynistic point of view, that king of the castle and all of these strange terms that were on this wheel are specifically geared to sort of alienate women. And so my spin on it was a little bit different. I thought the 5-woman, 1-man makeup of the jury, this was a mistake. The women on the jury are going to say, what are you doing, grandpa, using this outdated wheel? This is sexist. This is, even though it's sexist against men, I think people are still going to react to it that way. I just thought that was a very weird mistake. And I also didn't like that the state didn't catch it and point it out.
Okay, well, I was going to say, the one thing that I think that I think kind of screwed up the state, though, that may backfire, was their point was that they were trying to say that Ashley had been out of this wheel for so long that they were trying to say, well, if you're not in this power wheel after 6 months, you're living on your own, making your own money, are you in that wheel still? That could backfire if someone's been in a situation, because I've never been involved in it, but I mean, if you've been abused by someone and then they meet you 3 years later or whatever, those memories are still going to come back. And
Yeah,
so
and
I think that
Mike,
backfired to the
I would
state.
actually say that you might be surprised. I mean, it may not be in a relationship; it can be in a friendship. It can be in all sorts of situations where people use power and control to manipulate you. Right? Like you can probably, if you imagine it, think of a person who uses intimidation or emotional abuse, or they talked about that male privilege piece of it. But what that piece is really about doing is defining roles, right? Like you serve me, you're the dependent, I'm the one who makes the big decisions. That can play out in all sorts of relationships. It can play out with parents and children, it can play out with spouses, it can play out with friends. I'm willing to bet you could find some friends where that's happening. And I think the whole idea there of that wheel, it's true. People get locked into it. Rarely do you see all the elements at play. And that's one of the real issues in this case is the physical part of it. Really, 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 was it ever there before? And even if it wasn't there before, there's the question of like, do you anticipate it because it's a part of the underlying threats? And what does it mean, even if you rightly anticipate it and it hasn't happened before? But I think we all experience people in our lives who are doing some elements of those things. And, I think for the prosecution to minimize it is going to be somewhat dangerous with the jury, just as dangerous as using the outdated wheel.
I think it was a mistake. I'm not sure they minimized it. I'm not sure they caught it, but I'm glad you said parents because that was the example that popped into my mind. Is anybody with a parent knows that that can happen for decades and decades and decades, even if you're not in contact with them anymore. I think that was a perfect example. But I still think it's going to rub women the wrong way that that guy put that wheel up the way he did, whether it was on purpose or not. He might just be like a doddering old guy who hasn't updated his files since 1978. I don't know.
Yeah,
Well,
let's. I guess. Oh, sorry.
I just
Just
wanted to make
moving on.
one more
And go ahead,
point.
but go ahead, Anna.
Um, and this might surprise you, Mike, because you know how strongly I feel about this case, but I'm willing to call balls and strikes. I think Dr. Ferris was a powerful witness for the defense. I think he was able to prove some elements of the case that they're trying to present. And so I think, if we're counting tick marks, they might have gotten a few more than the state did on this one. But I don't know that his testimony combined with his presentation was as strong as the defense hoped it might be. I think they could have presented the power control wheel and the elements that they were trying to come across better with a more well-spoken and measured domestic
Well,
abuse.
yeah, but it's always. I mean, it's always easy for us to be able to say, well, use a bitter expert. I mean, you got to find somebody out there. You got to be able to somebody that wants to put in 50 hours that wants to travel. So, I mean, I guess you'd have to ask a
I
lawyer how
also think
hard.
there's another element to it that might be at play too. You choose the best expert that you can afford who's willing to say what you want to say. And I've seen more than once in covering trials, you go to very senior experts and they will say things like, there's no way on earth I'm saying that, or I'm not exactly sure, or I'm kind of on the fence. You can't use those people, even if they're very articulate. So,
But
And
also,
we're gonna
there's a
and we're gonna get
huge
to another expert that's kind of like that too, because I think going back to the Karen Reed, we would have loved a much better crash test constructionist, better than the state trooper that was on there. I mean, I guess we'll get when we get to Michael Haig. He had this nice 3D image modeling software that I think if they had used it in the other cases, that it might have been better for it. So let's, I guess, moving on. I guess he was important. When next one was Gina Torchia. I didn't really get anything from her. She was just on there. She was like a assistant to one of the attorneys and said, "Well, I kind of handed this. This was going on at this time, and so it was kind of a throwaway witness. So I'm not really going to do much with that one." The next one was Vincent Vizcario. I'm probably mispronouncing it. He was a realtor, and he was working with Doug on getting the house directly behind Ashley. And the timing was the most important part because it was during the time that Ashley had a restraining order again, or an injunction / restraining order. So they were trying to say, hey, he's following her. He's trying to get the house right behind her. So I mean, he was trying to sell it as, hey, this guy is kind of stalking him, and that was my opinion with the guy. I don't think that came across, but that's what the defense was trying to do. Anybody want to add on that?
I don't think the defense landed that plane as well as they hoped. And I think that the state really got in, kind of the knockout punch with the last line, which was Doug telling the realtor, well, I'm not going to do anything until I check with Ashley. And so I think, on the tally board, I think the state got the tally mark on that witness. I think that if they have some jurors that are inclined to believe Ashley, that might be, cumulative for them. But I really don't think that was a strong witness for the defense.
I agree.
Can I just throw one more thing in there just as a thought with that? I think it will depend on whether the jurors buy into or entertain the idea that as soon as Doug was present with Ashley, her behavior changed. Because if her behavior changed, if she sort of like folded like a person who was dependent every time he was in her presence, then somebody who is abusive could take that exact same position while sort of doing something abusive and controlling. So I think that's part of the reason why in this case, I think so much hinges on you believing that in his presence, she lost all of her will and ability to protect herself. And that, I mean, that's a real tough thing for the defense to kind of, I know they don't have to prove anything, but it's a tough thing for them to prove. But there's there's that striking example of it when they met after not talking for a long period of time, and everyone found it odd how quickly it just flipped. So
yeah, I guess. Oh, sorry. And people, I mean, if there's anybody that's on that jury that's been in either abusive or been like in a questionable, I mean, women probably understand. I mean, men will stalk women, so this is kind of one of those things that
I can assure you, Mike, it's not just men.
Okay,
right.
Well, yep, I got me in trouble. I did a Dr. Ferris. So yes, there's people that have anybody that's been in a questionable relationship where they've tried to block it off, but then all of a sudden the person follows them. I mean, they'll have to. They might believe that GPS story, the GPS tracker story, even though it was never proven. So those are the things that some. If the jury is going to believe Ashley, they got to believe they'll believe that he followed her. He followed her all the way down to Florida.
Or they'll believe that she believed it.
But there was testimony that conflicted with what you're saying, Jayson, which was that she, in the presence of people that she felt safe with, she never expressed any fear of Doug ever. And then when Doug was gone, she was like, oh my gosh, he's the big bad wolf. Everything's terrible. But when they're in group therapy or, marriage counseling or whatever, she never said, I feel threatened. She never said any of these things. It's her believability, which is the sticking point.
My understanding was that the testimony, and I may have this wrong, so let me know if I do. The testimony was that in couples counseling, she would never say anything was wrong when he was there.
Right.
You have that right.
But when she was alone, she would. And to me, that's I've seen that pattern play out all the time where an abusive person, and I'm not saying that he was, but where...
He was. We all agree that he was controlling and a jerk.
Yep. But, wherever it is, right? Like through different levels of it. And some of it is about the impact that it has on the other person as opposed to the level of what the other person was doing. But where I have seen people say to me, I have this real issue with this person, or I'm really afraid of them, and then the other person end up in the room and them not being able to get out any of it, right? And then we go back and I say, why didn't you say it? They talk about their fears. they hope I might bring something up, and then we repeat the same cycle because I'm not going to speak for them. So I think it can happen. But also at the same time, the problem in a court of law, as opposed to in a mental health environment where you may understand that, is even if it's all true, you've now introduced inconsistency.
Mhm.
And, prosecutors are not going to sit around and try and read your mind.
So
So it just creates this real challenge for her. I'm sorry, Anna.
Well, just to that point, and you used a really great word, inconsistency. So in a group therapy setting, when she's with Doug, she's saying, sure, yes, we're going to try to make it work. We're going to be a family. We're going to raise our kid together. When she was alone with safe people, therapists, friends, family, she wasn't telling anybody that she was scared of him. She was telling people that she wanted to be rid of him. The only people that she was telling that she was scared of him were law enforcement and courts.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay, well, but that could be a double-edged sword, because if he finds that out and finds out that you're double talking and finds that out, that's going to be a source of an argument. And I think that's going to get up to later in my point. So I'd like to, I guess, kind of move on that. The next one
And
is
it
kind of
also
prejudice.
begs
Oh,
the
sorry.
question that if you want to get away from him, why can't you?
She could,
Right.
but we'll get
She
to that in a
did.
minute.
Which kind of cuts both ways, though, right? Like, because there's why couldn't you walk away, right? And it's really complicated why people can't walk away,
Yep.
right? And that could be some kind of control or power or fear on her part, or it could be just because, sort of like what you're getting at, that there wasn't really a serious concern. And part of the problem with this whole case is it requires some mind reading.
Yep.
Either theory requires some mind reading, and that is difficult. So,
All right, let's let
Okay,
Mike
so-
go through his witnesses before we solve the case before the end of the episode.
Yeah, and, let's. Next one is the kind of the doctor we wanted more. I personally wanted more from. Maybe I didn't listen to all of it. Was Dr. Jayson Kintel? He was the counselor that I thought the court kind of appointed, but he was. I don't think he talked to him, but he didn't
He was
spend
not
enough time
court
with it.
appointed.
What?
He was
wasn't-
not court appointed. He was chosen by them for marriage counseling.
Okay, well,
Dr.
but he was there for the
Berger,
marriage counseling. He spent
yes,
some time with both, some time apart.
trauma counseling.
But these are kind of the experts that we kind of rely on, because they're supposed to be the behind the scene person to say that, yes, I believe that Ashley was telling the truth, or she was lying out of her teeth, or whatever. And they didn't want to make that opinion in my mind. I guess it's hard.
how do we ever know? I mean,
Yeah.
I've had clients, I'll never forget this client. I was seeing him for, I don't know, a year. And every week he came in telling me about how he had to do better to fix his marriage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? His wife came in with him one time, and I instantly picked up that she was like very excitable, volatile. I saw things that I hadn't seen before, right? And then the next session, he tells me about how he'll be sitting at the kitchen table. I had never heard this in a year. And she will stab him with his fingernail. She'll rip his hair out. And okay, so this is like, somewhat strange, not ridiculously surprising for a man having difficulty sharing that. But he could have also been making it up, except for he recorded it for me and showed me the videos and the audio of it. And so at that moment, until I hear that recording and that audio, I really don't know what is going on other than something strange is going on here. But I spent a year with him convincing me that he needed to work on him to fix this marriage. One meeting with his wife, it became very clear that this was way more complicated than I thought. So,
And that's really an interesting point, and I think we've talked about this, or maybe just Anna and I have talked about this. The fact that she is so young, there's such a huge age differential, and people will record a conflict in Walmart. They'll record anything, and her age and the fact that she has phones and she's grown up with smartphones, the fact that there is not one single recording. Even Gabby Petito has recordings of strange things that were happening in their relationship. Chris Watts, Josh Powell, these women who were much older than this person in this case had recordings of very strange things that were going on in their relationships. And this very, very young woman who doesn't have one recording except them playing a game show at Panera of this supposed abuse doesn't even hit record on her phone when she's alone in the house and her supposed abuser is going to be there with her alone. The very first thing, even me as an old person would do, would be to turn my phone on, record, and hide it somewhere.
I'd turn on the motion cameras.
Well, you could. Well,
Of
I mean, that
course.
is certainly but at the same time, if you that will egg an abuser on. Like, I mean,
No, I'm saying hide it. Like, women today know how to surreptitiously record people. I'm an old person. I know how to surreptitiously record people. The fact that she didn't ever, and not just on the day that Doug was killed, the fact that she didn't ever has stood out from the beginning for me because she was so much younger than he was. And they're playing video games on their phone at Panera. I mean, it doesn't make sense
I
that
can
you'd
give you a
have.
great story about why not to. So I was working in this practice. I'll be vague about this, but I was working in this practice, and this doctor did something unbelievably unethical, and he had power in the practice, right? And I kind of got into the mix, as I am wont to do when people do the wrong thing, and with him, and he became furious. But he also knew, I think, in the back of his head, that if I outed him on this point, he would be in deep crap. But he has this unbelievable temper tantrum. Barely anyone other than his assistants left in the office. He asked me to meet him in another office, and he throws a giant temper tantrum. About 20 seconds into his temper tantrum, he looks at my cell phone and grabs it and asks, "Are you recording this? You better not be recording this." And then he took my cell phone and put it out of the room. Meanwhile, anyway, the temper tantrum, he knocks a picture off the wall. It falls the whole time. This is just like typical Jayson thing. I'm just like calmly looking at him like, you are out of your effing mind.
That's so Jayson.
But I think some people can get paranoid about it and sort of threaten you. Ask me if I ever recorded him again. Yeah, like every time. But
oh yeah.
But I think.
But also, that's somebody who's been recorded before for being a jerk, in my opinion.
Or I think he may have just thought I was crafty, which, well, he was right.
Well, to bring it back around to Dr. Quintal, what I picked up, not so much from his testimony today, there wasn't really any notable moments in today's testimony, but in his previous testimony on direct from the state, he said that he told both of them that he didn't understand why they wanted to be together. And he was the one that pointed out that Ashley never expressed fear of Doug. She just expressed that she wanted to get away from him. And Dr. Quintal is the one that introduced us. He said the words, actually, I'm not going to say that. It was either him or Dr. Berger, but one of them said the words, "I was afraid she would abscond with the child to Maryland." But Ashley told Dr. Quintal that she was basically court shopping by moving to Maryland. She wanted to get to Maryland. She wanted to set up residence so that she could get the Maryland courts to do what the Florida courts were not doing for her.
Which, unfortunately, I think makes sense whether you're being abused or not being abused. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that happens when relationships break up. People seek what's going to be favorable to them. I mean,
for sure. And I think especially in the court system and especially with people who have custody, but actually stating that she was court shopping and then sort of having that backed up by that detective who said that she ordered him to arrest Doug, during a court hearing. Like, it's just a pattern of sort of she gets what she wants and
or outlandish behavior
but I
that
think
feels like it goes a little too far. Like, I can think of a client that I have, like, her husband lives in a very rural county. She lives in a more populous one with more sophisticated domestic violence people, more sophisticated judges, right? She does not want her case to go to that area because there are only two judges. They're old as dirt. They like do not get these kinds of things. So I mean, I get the idea of shopping what is, and I understand clients can get really upset, but I think what stands out about her is the audacity of some of her requests, the audacity of some of her behaviors, and her willingness to be so open with so many people about it. I don't know whether that tells me anything about her level of fear, but one of the things that I really firmly believe everybody's proven in this case is that she was clearly unwell. Whether that was because of domestic violence or her own things, it seems to be some combination of things. And it also seems clear he was not the model human being. So it becomes very hard for me in this case to tell exactly what's coming, what is coming and going. So, you know, I think my gut, and Mike, of course, you have more to go through, is that the answers in this case are really going to come from what we know about the moment it actually happened.
See, but I guess let's finish the witnesses first, and let's get back to that one, because that's, I think, where we have. I think it's what happened in the moment is what mattered, and not what the state is trying to provide or prove. But let's go and finish. We got 3 more, and 2 of them are kind of together. The lead
Mike, just if I could jump on that really quickly, it's the same problem as the Karen Reed trial. The state is very focused on rebutting the defense that they think is coming instead of telling the story that they need to tell.
I so agree, Jayson.
There's, I think, totally different between the 2 stories, but okay, let's Justin
Warren.
No,
it's not that. It's that trials are won by narrative.
Right.
And if you spend the whole time trying to knock out someone else's narrative at the beginning, you have ceded the ground to them, right? So like 100%. If you and I are in an argument, Mike, and I start off in my argument just trying to disprove your argument, I've already ceded the validity of your argument by simply just defending it. All I have to do is just tell my story. And that's the way prosecutions win, not by trying to disprove someone else's story. So that's the only point I was making.
Okay.
And somewhere Brett is saying amen.
Tilting at windmill.
I'm not sure he watches my shows or not. So next up, Justin Warren. He was the lead detective in the case, and this was kind of weird. And like both, like this is the worst part of the defense here, because he was just trying to put this guy on to impeach him on a couple. He wanted to show that there was bias from from 45 minutes into the investigation. Warren didn't even think about self-defense. He was just thinking murder, and that was his focus. And so, like, this could get the defense in trouble, because his parting remark was to Warren was like, you just did this because you thought there was murder or something like that. And everybody, the judge and prosecution, said you can't say that, and he ended up saying that. I was pissed at the defense for doing that, but that's why the defense, they are a defense. So I didn't think he added much. So the next 2 witnesses were, I think they agreed with the state for the most part. But what the first one was a forensic investigator. I mean, I guess we don't always like the defense experts that come in and try and do a reconstruction, but I don't think he disagreed too much. But the purpose of both of these, the defense wanted to say that, hey, Ashley's story doesn't conflict with the evidence at the site or with the evidence in the bedroom. So like he drew the CAD program that showed where the bullets were. And I think the question that nobody, I think, was overemphasized is 4 bullets were shot. She shot 4 bullets. 2 of them missed, or or 2 of them hit solidly. 1 hit the shoulder, like 1 hit the arm and grazed, and went through the wall. Like it went through the wall. So it was kind of like the whole argument was that, and what the state was trying to say, and why it was kind of more important, was which shot was which. And the medical examiner at the end, her belief was that the first bullet hit the like arm, which caused so then he turned to avoid the gun, and as he was turning, the second bullet hit the right side of the chest. I don't know if you can see, and came out the back left. And then as he was falling, like normal impact from a bullet will push you backwards because there is some physical momentum. So you're going to fall backwards when being hit with a bullet. As I guess, well, we've probably seen it too many times in movies to know if it's true or not. So he's falling back, and as he's falling back, the third or fourth shot hits him in the leg and blows out the knee and the knee and the leg bones. So, but of course, I think both sides say that the shot to the chest was the shot that killed him because it perforated the lung and went through the spine and probably paralyzed him. There was some argument of how fast he would be paralyzed from that bullet, but so that, I mean, both sides agree the shot to the chest killed him. So I don't think there was too much. The state wanted to make the argument that, I mean, of course, always in these is in self-defense is if you shoot them in the back or the side, it's not really self-defense if they're running away. So the state was trying to get further into saying the shot wasn't completely in front. He was trying to get away, and she continued to shoot him after he got away. Or like he was trying to run away, and she still continued to shoot. So which ends ends at self-defense. Because if he's running, then you don't really have the ability to shoot. That was what the state was trying to get from those two witnesses. And then defense was trying to say it was more up front. Anybody disagree or agree with that?
So I think Haig was a very smart man. I wish, for the defense's sake, that he had practiced a little more brevity, because I think he's totally geeking out on. You could tell he loves what he does. I love that passion in a person, but I disassociated multiple times during his testimony. And guns and forensics and ballistics and all of that is something I'm into. Same. And so that's testimony that I would normally be hanging on, but he was just droning on. And I appreciate a witness who can speak in layman's terms. Yeah. I appreciate a witness who is consistent in using, terms specific to that profession. I find myself, it feels very discordant to me when they get super professional, scientific, nerdy speak, and then they use terms like liquidy.
I know. What was that? What was going on?
I mean, what he's trying. I think he was trying to. I know what he was trying to say.
I think we all know what he was trying to say.
Yeah, we know what he was.
So discordant.
Yeah, it was weird.
Too much.
So I think that testimony, much like the other one, I think that testimony would have served the defense well, if maybe there had been some more coaching by Taylor. However, Taylor also likes to talk a lot, so maybe he thinks that that's a good strategy. The Emmy, Dr. Liu, right? That was her name?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Emma Liu. Yeah. She was, first of all, she was beautiful.
She was beautiful.
I kept getting distracted by how pretty she was, and it's so sexist of me to say in 2024, but she was beautiful. She was intelligent. She was so well-spoken. I don't know that the tally board really moved in either direction with her testimony. I think it did help to bolster what the defense is trying to say, but I think that it also did not take away from the state's case. But I
don't know. I think it showed that he was not coming at her. Like if you,
I believe that
watch it a couple of times, if you watch those recreations a couple of times, and even she said on cross-examination, yes, what I'm saying is just possible. It isn't, probable or even likely. It's just possible. But the other thing that was possible was he was completely caught off guard, which is totally supported by everything that she showed on the stand, and was kind of moving away from her as he was being shot. I mean, I don't think that was not a slam dunk for the defense at all. And I think anybody who really goes back and looks at that recreation will say, ooh, I don't know. You could, I think, even more easily say this man was caught off guard. He was moving away from the shooter, and everything that you thought happened.
Well, I think, and that's what I was trying to say. I think at best, this testimony was a draw. I don't think either side won with this testimony. It was a good witness for the defense to build their case. And I don't know. I wish we had British Jessica on here. She could tell us. I don't know if in Florida the self-defense argument means that you have to prove. I'm anxious. We heard parts of the jury instructions. I'm anxious to hear the actual jury instructions tomorrow.
Yeah, I was going to get
Is
up that
your
next. But
question
yes.
whether the stand your ground law requires you to prove that there's an actual threat or that
Well, stand your ground was disallowed.
well,
She can't
yeah, I
claim
know.
stand your ground.
Oh. But I actually think that's the ball they're playing, even though the judge is disallowed.
I agree.
I think the real question for the jury is, despite the removal of the self-defense theory, I think that's probably what the jury's going to decide it on. Was this self-defense or not? I mean, most juries, I think. Because clearly,
but that was included in the
defense.
And I think this is where I disagree with you. The jury can still, because there's justifiable force allowed in homicide, and there's in Florida, homicide. And that's the law. The jury can go with the law, and that's what it is. It says it has.
They can, but stand your ground is specific, and it's disallowed. Stand your ground.
I want to look that up because I disagree with you on that. They can.
But that was what was determined.
No. Those are two different things. An excusable homicide is completely different than the castle stand your ground law.
Totally different.
So think about it this way. So the excusable homicide is a defense in court. Stand your ground instantly gives you immunity.
Right.
So it can't even go to trial. It can't go
Jayson's
forward.
correct.
At least in the new version of it. It just,
No, but what we're arguing about is that the defense can, the juror can still look at the justifiable rules for homicide and say that she met one of those rules for homicide, but
it's not stand your ground.
Yeah,
but
not stand your ground.
But there's and then there's several parts of it, and then let's go over that. That was what I was going to go over next. One is that if there's imminent bodily harm to yourself or another, or you're worried about, or death to you. So that's so that's the one thing is that if you believe there is, so will the jury think that? So that is one portion is justifiable homicide. The second is it allows you to use deadly force. It allows you to use force. The question will be, does it allow you to use force? Or the threat if you're stopping a felon or a crime. And that's what the defense was arguing and that's what they were arguing at the end. In that there's a way that two of those things they kind of combine, but if they believe that he hit her, that is assault, and so that and false imprisonment, that if the jury believes that he was trapping her in that bedroom, that would be false imprisonment. It would give her justification to use deadly force. That is the defense that they're going to use. I know you're not going to agree, but that is what they're going to close with, that she had a right to defend herself against somebody that had hit her and potentially could hit her more.
I know what I would open my close with. It would be really easy. The dog story.
Blame the dog
story for me is absolutely he confessed to striking the dog. I have seen so many domestic violence situations where a man is coming at a woman and the dog jumps in between. Sometimes the man wins, sometimes the dog wins. He confessed to it, fired a bullet in the ceiling. Start with that and end with what happened. And it's a viable narrative. And so much about this case is so difficult, but there's like a clear defense narrative to be told.
Well, and the dog is the reason that I changed my opinion about the case. Because in the beginning, the only story that I heard was the dog. And I was like, throw him under the jail. That's terrible. Obviously, he's a terrible person. But then as I listened to the trial, still don't believe her at all. But going back to those.
But it's also possible we have two terrible people.
Two terrible people, absolutely, and only one of them made it out alive. Only one of them made it out. But back to your point, Mike, I don't think the forcible kidnapping or whatever, I think that's don't even go down that road. That doesn't make sense. She buzzed him into the gate, and then she also let him into her house. So forcible imprisonment or whatever, that's a non-starter.
And
That's
that's
a
what I disagree with
non-starter.
you, and it was in the chat that once you add, like, the whole problem was that, like, yes, you invite someone into your house, but then you start, like, I mean, we all know how stressful moving is. So you start moving the boxes, and you start talking about it, and you get in. I mean, what I believe is that a fight ensued, that those two fought about something while they were moving, and then it moved to the bedroom, and that it was from that fight they were arguing, and the
The
question
question is, did she feel trapped? Right?
I
yeah,
don't
That's
think that's the
ultimately it.
question at all.
I
no,
don't
I think
either.
that's where we disagree. I think that
I don't
I
think
don't buy
that's
the
the
state. I
question.
don't buy the state's case that this was a long planned out. It was just a
I think
fight.
I think it hinges on what you said first, which is I don't think she felt in prison. I don't think that's an issue. I think the issue is, do people believe he just snapped and hit her and started saying all these things that she said in her terrible reenactment of what happened that day? Do people believe he hit her? Which is why the state is going to bring those very important photographs in as rebuttal evidence on clothes, because the whole thing hinges on, did he hit her in the face?
Right.
Which I don't think he did, but
And I think there's always a problem with the defendant testifying, and like one of them is
yes.
all the rebuttal. But my gut is that the bar for the defense is a lot lower than it appears. Like, I think the
Yeah.
bar for the defense really is, did she, with most jurors, I don't know, who knows with these jurors, it's going to be, did she fear for her life? And if they perceive she feared for her life, unless there's a lesser included charge than second degree murder,
Yeah.
I
There
don't
is.
think, if they, even if there was absolutely no reason for her to fear for her life, but the jury truly believes she did, I have a hard time seeing them going for second degree.
Well,
I don't.
Jason,
Yeah.
we've talked a lot about the makeup of the jury. So it's 5 women and 1 man, because it's a 6-person
Mhm.
jury. What do you think? Because I haven't heard your opinion on this. What do you think that means for her that there are 5 women and 1 man?
I don't think it necessarily makes anything more favorable, frankly. I mean, some of the toughest people I have seen on other women for not leaving, which I don't endorse this idea. I think it's so
Sure.
complicated, have been other women. And at the same time, they've also been the most sympathetic and understanding. And I mean, like, literally the same women, not like speaking of pools. So I think it can be really, really, really complicated by all sorts of things, like your own cognitive dissonance about what you would do in said situation. So I don't think having a jury of primarily women necessarily helps her as much as some people think.
I don't think it
I
helps
mean,
her. I
as
think Brett
illustrated
thinks
by
Lydia
this,
agrees.
Yeah.
by
Yes.
this actual conversation, because you have like two guys who are sort of on the fence here,
right.
two women who are like Fryer. So,
But Brett also pointed out that it was probably going to be a problem for her, that it was
Yep.
5 women and 1, that was probably a mistake. But I want to hear what Anna has to say.
Yeah. I think you can work
Well,
against it.
honestly, I think we've taken Mike's podcast away from him. Mike, were you done with recapping the day?
Yes,
This
we're
is what
done. Very
roundups
well.
are like.
The only thing that left in the end of the day was that they went over the jury instructions, which we were talking about. So and just to clear, I think they did include me, like, so when you do murder, like second degree, you can include the lesser included charges. So that would be involuntary manslaughter and
That's the only
voluntary.
one. There's
think-
only one lesser included.
Is it
and it's
involuntary? Or
It's just manslaughter, I believe.
okay, maybe Florida only has manslaughter, which is manslaughter.
Yeah, it's
Talking
not
to my defense
involuntary.
attorney friend, manslaughter is an imperfect self-defense crime. So,
Yep.
so if you yes, you may have been felt that you could have shot him, but you didn't really. It's manslaughter, not like there's like murder is supposed to normally think that I mean, there's two different definitions of murder. One is planning it, like was we think out, which is what I kind of think the state's case is, but they never charged her with first degree murder. So that was
Because it
kind of
wasn't
weird.
a capital offense. There was no aggravating factors that made it capital.
And I had heard maybe Florida's like, if you commit murder, we're gonna fry you until you become barbecue for some barbecue joint.
That's
So, I mean,
Texas.
Well, I think most of the
Texas or Texas.
Texas.
even in Texas, most of the states, and I looked into this when Daybell was going on what constitutes the death penalty.
Right.
Um,
It's a
so
compounded crime.
most states have murder 2 or whatever the equivalent name is. In Texas, it's just murder. Texas
Right.
has
Capital
felony murder and then murder. Felony murder is the death penalty.
Capital.
Capital.
Oh, yes,
Because
you're right.
felony usually refers to a
Felony is
murder
Indiana.
and
Bank.
commission of another felony.
But I think most states, since the death penalty came back in, I believe, in the 70s, I think most states have revised their statutes to say, in order to put somebody to death, it can't just be killing another person. It has to be an aggravated killing of another person. And we don't have any of those in this crime. So it's 25 to life is what she's facing.
So
Yeah.
I think an aggravating factors are required in any death penalty case. It's not just a state thing, but it's on the federal level that there's the expectation that a jury decides on the death penalty, and the jury decides. It's the only time they decide the sentence, and they have to show aggravating factors. But I think the thing about the lesser included charge being included, the thing about manslaughter that would be really attractive to a jury here is you can say to yourself, okay, she may have really feared him in that moment, but she wasn't justified in fearing him. Her behavior was reckless. A normal person wouldn't react in this situation, and you can give her manslaughter without the second degree.
And honestly, I think out of the four of us, I probably have the strongest feelings about this case. And honestly, in the end, if she gets manslaughter, I'm okay with it. I believe it's murder. I believe it was murder 2. I believe it was premeditated. If I can, I'm going to give my colloquy now because I feel like it's something that all three of you can find points to debate on. So I believe that she jumped into a marriage. I don't even presume to know what was going on in her mind, but I have jumped into relationships impetuously in the past because I wasn't a whole person, and so I was trying to fill those parts with me with something else. And I am willing to give her the benefit of the doubt that she was unhealthy when she started this. I think she realized right away it's not what she wanted. I do think that he was showing some tendencies that were not ideal in a spouse. The shooting, the ceiling, the punching the dog, the kicking the cat, all of that. And I would want to get away too. And so she got pregnant. And I believe her when she says that the pregnancy made her ill. Pregnancy is hard on a woman. She wanted to move to Florida, and he supported her in that. And he took her there, and then she ghosted him. And I think at that point, she saw that child as hers and hers alone, and had no intention of ever giving him the opportunity to be a father to that child. So the birth is coming. He is trying to reach out. Despite the fact that there is an injunction, he reaches out to her through a lawyer, which is the legal way to do it when there's an injunction. And she, instead of responding to that, and it didn't come out through testimony, we don't know, I will be charitable and say maybe she did go into labor the next day after she was given this notice from the attorney. Maybe it did happen that way. Coincidences do happen. So let's be charitable and say that she went into labor, but she never let the man know that his child was born. The baby was something like 6 weeks old before he knew it had come into the world. It was 6 months old before he found out its name. And that was only through a court filing where she was trying to terminate his parental rights before he ever had a chance to establish them. I think her plan to keep Doug out of hers and Emerson's life started before the baby was born. She's trying to go through the court system to win this battle. The court system is not playing along with her. She is not winning the fights that she is picking. And Doug is granted court-ordered visitation with his child. She did not have to participate in that. She was rid of the man in every way except for sharing a child with him. And people manage that every single day with toxic and abusive spouses without killing them.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, I have to trust the courts and I will continue to ask the courts to intervene when I see a problem, she flipped the switch and said, we're going to play a happy family. The very first time that Doug met his baby daughter, she invited herself on their family time. And she started play acting a happy family relationship with Doug and Emerson. And she took it one step further and was actually dating Doug. They went to the movies together, alone, without the baby. They went and did things, just the two of them. They did things as a family. They did things with her mother along. She let Doug believe that they were a family.
Uh-oh.
Do we lose
I didn't do
Anna?
that on purpose.
She ended on a great word. She let them
Oh,
believe
no.
they're a family. You know, I can jump in while she's coming back. The one thing I would say is that I think Anna's got a lot of really good points there, but one point that I will make is that the courts and our social services agencies are absolutely inadequate when it comes to domestic violence, even custody issues, even divorce issues. So I think I have a hard time believing that the reasonable choice for a lot of people before there has been violence or even after there's been violence or there's been emotional abuse, I have a hard time saying you should have turned to our system to deal with it.
Oh, I
Because
get that. Yeah.
yeah, it is absolutely inadequate. Now,
Yep.
I understand there's some question about whether any of it's true. I think where I land right now, which is like my very comfortable fence, but I think the state has not proven yet, and maybe their closing argument will tie it all together. Because they don't need premeditation for second degree murder, but they need to show that it was for a reckless disregard of human life, you know, grossly sort of carelessly disregarding the safety of the public or something along those lines. And second degree is often charged when you have a pre-existing relationship with someone and pre-existing tensions in Florida. But I don't think the state has really proven that. And I think their fallback charge is really the manslaughter charge. I think in a way, the state may very well be right about their theory. They do not have a good story. And I think a lot of it will come down to whether the defendant was believable on the stand and how well they can rebut her. But the defense has such a better story for anyone who has ever tried to deal with any of these issues through our system. I mean, there's a reason why Lorena Bobbitt got off. There is a reason why we look back at cases like the Menendez brothers and other ones similar to that and say, and we have these question marks and clouds over our head because we know, and this is the real problem, that we have not set up adequate remedies to deal with the underlying issues that she alleges. And so, like, for me, comes back to the dog, right? There's a dog that he's hit that he admits to, a bullet in the ceiling. And maybe she didn't avail herself of all the resources that she could have, but why should any woman or man have to live in that environment? So that instantly, for me, lends some credence to the idea that there's some abuse going on. There are also signs that she may be abusive in some other ways or manipulative in other ways. But I think even that creates a burden in my mind, right? And not necessarily a legal burden, but a burden to show me, how do you know that this was either premeditated, which is not on the table because it's not first-degree murder, or that it truly was reckless. I am not sure I necessarily believe her story, but I have a hard time feeling that the state has disproved it. So it's really going to be about rebuttal, I think, for me.
But I have two prongs, and
Mhm.
I agree with everything you said about the case. But I'm also a person who, like all of us, has observed completely insane people doing completely insane things. And so I'm sitting here on the jury and I have these two prongs. One prong, which is really important to me, is number one, she was not believable at all when she testified. But number two, the testimony about the photo, like the frame, the shadow box with the rose, and the daughter changing it out to a photo of her mother, and the ballerina losing her shiz over that and being really upset and starting a fight. That has so many echoes of Karen Reed, just like not letting go of that issue where she's competing with a woman who has lost her mother, a child who has lost her mother. That is psychotic. It's weird. It would stick in my mind as a juror. Her completely bizarre performance on the stand would stick in my mind as a juror. But then on the other side, there's the you have to believe prong. And you'd have to believe, let's set the dog aside. There's nothing been offered that he ever assaulted her in any way. Nothing. Okay. So let's put the dog aside. Let's put the tracker aside. You'd have to believe through all these schmoopy texts and the video game at Panera and everything's fine and kiss, kiss and Jesus and I'll drive the U-Haul over and everything's fine. And then he just bursts in the door. She happens to run to the one room in the midst of all the moving chaos that has two unsecured guns, even though a toddler had been there moments before, and there's a gun in the laundry basket. And she just happens to go right to the gun like James Bond and defend herself from the ogre who's trying to attack her, who's literally never assaulted her before. Those two things, just me as a juror. I'm not talking about the evidence. I'm saying me as a juror. I'm saying, I'm sorry, lady. I'm not there. I'm just not there with you. Yes, he was obviously not a stellar person. That doesn't carry the death penalty, unfortunately, in a lot of our minds. It just doesn't. You can't just kill somebody
It's
because
a
they're a
shame.
jerk. You can't just kill somebody because they're a jerk to animals, even though we all have strong feelings about that. You can't do that. So if I have to go down the you have to believe prong that she's some kind of ninja who just ran to the one room in the house where the unsecured firearms were, two of them, not just one, to defend herself from a guy that had never laid a hand on her and was sending schmoopy texts that day and helping her move, which is the last thing anyone wants to do for anybody in any relationship.
See, it's interesting, Lydia. So the way I look at something like that is schmoopy texts are like flowers, right? Flowers can be sent because I love you, and flowers can be sent for apologies, and flowers can be sent for manipulation. Like, I can't pick up, and if
Right. I
same
get
thing with
that.
helping her. I mean, like, what does that mean, right? Are you helping her because you love her? Are you helping her because you're manipulating? Are you helping
Moving
her
in Florida,
whatever,
Jason,
whatever it is?
hot
Trust
down here.
me, it is hot. Yeah, that is a factor. But I think for me, when I look at this situation, I think part of the hard part is like the difference between law and what's reasonable and what's fair. And I don't
Right.
believe someone should have to wait to be hit
No,
to
absolutely
defend
not.
themselves.
I do
So
not
how
believe
do
that
we,
either.
in a case where we don't really have evidence of that, right? Regardless of what's being alleged, we don't really have evidence of that. So how do we draw the line? Do we say to the person, you have to get beat before you can
No,
defend yourself,
absolutely not. And I think that's
what?
Mike's point. That's Mike's
Yeah.
position. Is he saying you don't have to you don't have to wait until that happens, which I completely agree with. You
I
don't.
think
I
the
agree
biggest
too.
part for you is like, what luck,
Yeah, well,
What
I mean,
luck.
what luck.
I mean,
And
I guess not the
only
that's
one
kind of
of
the
them ended up dead. Only one of them ended up dead. So you always
oh,
have to there's like the sanctity of the victim thing, right? they're both terrible people. Only one of them is dead. So then what
But, like,
happened?
look at this story a simple, different way. Let's say she ended up dead, right? And the story he tells is that she went for the gun, he grabbed the gun, they wrestled, he got the gun, and he shot her. We'd
Sure.
all be like, fry him, right? I mean, so it's really,
Right.
for
Yeah.
me, it's really, I think it comes down to, like Mike was saying, what happened in that moment. And what happened in that moment is very ambiguous. And yes,
Yeah.
maybe it's not believable that she lucked out. And what happened in the relationship is completely ambiguous.
Yeah.
I have a friend I can think of right now, and every day you would see her with a boyfriend, and they were like great smiles and pictures and happiness. Meanwhile, he's like beating her while pregnant.
For
So,
sure.
I mean, the outward appearances don't tell me much, right?
Agree.
And
So
I
I can
think
say,
yeah.
Okay, I'll let
My-
Anna speak, and then I will do my closing. I'm not
Okay.
anywhere close to Brett or Al. I'm not even. I write
Well,
better.
we want to
than
hear
I
what
do.
you
Alice.
think after you've listened to us.
okay, first I want to finish my colloquy since the
I
power.
know.
decided-
Sorry.
I hope it wasn't another raccoon.
No,
So, and I'll just get to the end. She was rid of him in every way that mattered. She did not have to be doing the things that she was doing with him. She could have left it to the court. She could have trusted but worried that the court was doing the best that they could for Emerson. And the minute that she had a complaint, report it, which she was already doing while she was still playing happy family with him. She did not have to. And I have all the grace in the world. My friends here don't even know this, but if I ever win the lottery, I'm starting a battered women's shelter. That is what I'm going to do with the money luck that I get if it ever happens. I have all the grace in the world for a battered woman. I do not believe that this woman was battered to an extent that justifies homicide, because she could have been rid of him.
but isn't it about what her state of mind
Well,
is? Not
see,
about
and
But
now-
her
like,
state of mind
not
was
about
murderous.
not about like comparing. Do you know what I mean?
Her
No,
state
I
of mind
agree.
was that the courts were
That's
not
fair.
working fast enough. And she had dug herself into a hole with the whole "we can move to Maryland and be a family," telling him to his face, but then telling everybody else that she wants to be rid of him and she's moving to Maryland to make the Maryland courts do what the Florida courts aren't doing. Her
just
state of
think
Yeah,
mind
that's
courts-
was,
courts, social service agencies, all of these things, these tools that we use to solve domestic problems are
Mhm.
absolutely inadequate to solve them.
That's
So
true.
I understand why you're saying she's not getting what she wants fast enough. She may have never gotten what she wants.
She
and
might not
even if
have.
there was domestic abuse, she
I
may have
think-
gotten, the courts are absolutely unreliable.
okay.
And
way to do it.
custody is so deadly. Custody is one
Mike
of the
didn't
most
realize he was
deadly
getting crossfire.
situations.
Yes,
No,
I did.
Mike-
but
Mike's like,
Exactly.
it's
I'm
what
just
you
trying to
you
give
and
my colloquy.
Go ahead. Give
Okay.
it, Mike.
So
Right.
where I disagree with you, I guess I have like
Which one
I
of us?
see this 2 minute. Okay. Let me start with the simple one for Lydia's, because they were cleaning out that room. We saw the video today where the only thing really in that room was the
They were
the
cleaning out the
mattress.
garage.
So it was very like, so she would go into the bedroom to get away. And the gun in that situation was very easy to find. So it wasn't like she was
with a toddler.
with but when you're moving, you're gonna want like that.
You're
I mean,
going to lock it away.
well, people, there's what people should do and what people do. So I disagree with you that it was that hard. She had an easy time finding the gun. She went in there. She thought she could escape, that he would leave, and I bet she did pull out that gun, thinking that if she pointed at him, like he would be like a normal person and leave. Okay, so where I disagree with you, I think this was a normal, unfortunately, kind of a normal it's an abnormal normal relationship where they'd split up for a time period, and there's many times where in a relationship somebody is going to be able to say, hey, I maybe he lied, maybe he said he's like, I mean, that's what abusers can do, is like, well, I love you, I mean, I'll do better if I come back to you, let's work on a slow relationship, let's spend some time together. And I think she could, like most people, and like, I mean, it's always easy from outside a relationship to say
True.
what a person should do. I mean, we've all been in those relationships where our friends like dump them and go on Tinder and find somebody new. That she had conflict, she was conflicted, and easy that when she was with him, she probably saw the good things that he could do and some of the things that he could do, but and that he was probably good with the kid, and but to the other people that she was like, yeah, I'm very worried about what would happen. Maybe like, there's signs that he'll probably do what he was doing. I know I should leave, but I still love him, and I'm not. So you're gonna play both sides, and I think that was the relationship, and that she was trying to find a normal way to get out of there. I do believe that there was a fight that afternoon, and something happened, and that she tried to get away, and that's where she went in there and hoped that he would leave. I don't have a problem really with involuntary manslaughter, but I don't think it was murder too, and I don't think it was ever planned. I think there were some things you would have seen that if she had planned this more with some of the fights that they would have had. So I think that this is either an involuntary manslaughter case, or really, I guess it'd be, I don't know what Florida, if they break it, it'd be more voluntary manslaughter, that they fought, she used excessive force, and that was the case, and not it was not murder in my mind. So
And I don't disagree with your premise in the scenario at all. I don't believe her.
I don't
That's the
either.
difference between you. There's only one difference between our positions, and it's that I don't believe her for a second. I just don't believe her. I don't trust her. I don't think she's authentic. But everything you're saying is absolutely true and absolutely plausible. I just don't believe her.
but
Yeah.
I just
And
don't think people could
I
hide that
agree.
as well as she did. Like people aren't that underneath that they could hide that. I would have think there would have been a lot more like I'd asked for like somewhere I post like, can we get all their text streams? Because I think if she really had been that way, I think those two would have fought somewhere down the line about their move to Maryland. That that he would have there would have been something in the text streams about like, why are you like they would have fought more over Maryland if there was something underneath. So that is my
And that's
view.
another thing, Mike. She couldn't stop giving herself up to people. Like when she was talking to the cop about arresting him in front of the judge, this woman was not like holding her cards close or consistently, to your point, Lydia, but she definitely was not holding her cards. So I would expect to see some signs. But, I will admit there's my bias here, which I love to talk about, which is I'm always willing to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. So, and I think you guys probably, rightfully so, which is why this conversation has probably been pretty balanced and good. You guys bring a healthy skepticism. I joke with Brett that I could not convict anyone, but then he reminds me of Richard Allen in the Delphi case, and I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
So
in the one case that I think we need to know more details before I convict him. But
Oh, for sure. I
another
agree
discussion.
with you there. But I started on the other side of this case, and
Right.
I ended up where I am. And Mike knows I never start out thinking anybody's innocent. So it's a big change for me in this case.
Okay.
And it moved the needle for me. I just don't believe her.
And
Okay.
I started out knowing the facts of the state's case. I was looking for the next trial. Karen Reed ended.
Yeah.
We needed something, and I threw this out there to the group, like, hey, let's watch this one. And so I had researched the facts of the state's case, and I knew the outcome of the Stand Your Ground hearing. And so I didn't know about the dog. I didn't know about the bullet in the ceiling. But based on the evidence that the state had presented in the Stand Your Ground law case, which is essentially the same they presented here, I convicted her. I think she's guilty of murder too.
So, and I have a question for you. So, looking at the Stand Your Ground hearing and then also the Second Circuit Court of Appeals decision on it, do you think the state has proven, because that's really about law, right? Like not facts, but do you think the state has proven their case as well at trial as they did in those hearings?
I think they did. I think that they've been relatively consistent based on the research that I did. I think that the defense has honed their craft a bit between stand your ground and here. And so I think they've muddied the waters a little bit. And that's why I said, if they get manslaughter, I'm happy with it. She'll spend some time in jail for taking a man's life.
Well, what's interesting is in the stand your ground hearing, Judge White had a very damning statement about her that the jury in this case has not heard and will not hear. And that's that she was lying and it was not stand your ground and that it should go to trial. And I mean, that's the beauty of the jury system, right? They're untarnished by all of these things. But in that hearing, that judge very clearly laid out.
Taylor tried to get him kicked out because he said that. So
and I love this judge. I love
do.
He's a really good judge, except, I mean, of course, they're always going to say the bias. And I mean, we know in the Karen Reed that if Bev was making the decision, she would have been in jail by now.
I'm not as big a fan of Bev, but
so, I mean, I really liked how he explained. Like, he also sounds like his exact voice is my doctor. So I keep expecting him to say, "Well, take your vitamins or
take your
blood pressure medicine." Okay,
he has such a good rapport with the jurors and everything. You know, he was talking about how he worked with kids, and you can really see that in the way that he communicates. But I don't know, he seems really fair. He's
very fair.
Made a bunch of rulings against both sides and a bunch of rulings for both sides, but it is very interesting that the jury is not going to hear what he said in that stand your ground hearing, which I didn't hear until long after we were listening to the trial. So it didn't influence me, but it was interesting.
I never complained about judges out of fear that I may be a defendant.
Right. Right. All judges are good. All of them.
So Brett.
Never met one I haven't liked.
No, they're fabulous.
Brett and I have debated. He believes that opening statements are the most important part of a trial. I vehemently disagree. I believe that closing arguments can win or lose a case. And then,
hello, Alice. Come on.
Yes. And then I think right behind that, one of the most important things that can happen is the jury instructions. And as we got to see this afternoon, there's an art to crafting jury instructions.
Yeah.
I love the way White was handling it. He was like, let's
all out there. I think you're right. A case can definitely be won on close. It can definitely be won on opening. Like the thing that got Alec Murdaugh convicted was his own testimony and the rebuttal. But I think the problem with not having an adequate opening statement is no one can follow the evidence.
Like
Larry. No one can follow the evidence.
I will do a sports analogy with the opening statement where I don't think you can, like with baseball, and if you're I think most of you are a baseball fan, you can't win the pennant in April and May. You can only lose in April and May. We really all thought Lally came very close to losing that case in the opening arguments, and then he just dragged it on. So we'll get this panel together when we get closer or what we want to talk about that one. So let's finish up. And so as I understand it, tomorrow morning is going to be going over jury instructions. They're going to have maybe one or two witnesses. They're going to bring back the daughter, but the state just wanted to do like 3 questions. So it probably take. The good thing about this case is these witnesses have gone really fast. So I think he had said that they're going to get to closing arguments about 1:00 tomorrow. So that would, I bet, 30 minutes aside. So I would be willing. So 2 is 2, and then.
Well, they both asked for an hour and a half each.
Oh, okay. So I mean, they're gonna. So tomorrow, let's say they're not going to start deliberating tomorrow. They're gonna finish close, get through jury instructions to the jury, and send them off at the end of the day and say come back on Wednesday morning. So I will give everybody a prediction of when and what charge the jury is going to find. So we'll go with Lydia first. What time are you predicting? And you're going to find guilty of murder too. So are they going to come back before lunch on Wednesday?
I think they will deliberate in 4 hours or less. Okay, do we get to record 2 of these? In case I'm wrong, I can say the other thing.
No.
Okay, so I'm going to say 4 hours or less. I think this is going to be a short jury deliberation, and I do think they're going to find her guilty of the highest charge. But I have a caveat, which I told Brett earlier. I always make my predictions based on what I would say as a juror. So this is just me sitting on the jury. This is how I would vote. I'm not a betting person, so I don't know what the odds are. But me as a juror, under 4 hours and guilty of the highest charge.
Okay, I think someone else is going to agree with that same time. So somebody might have to do like 5 hours or 3 hours to beat the other person.
Are we doing closest without going over? Because that would work.
No, we'll do closest.
Price is Right.
We'll do closest without going over. Or
Okay.
no, with going
Deal.
over. So closest.
Actually, I think I'm going to surprise you, Mike. I think they will get the case tomorrow afternoon with a little bit of time left in the day. And just like I said in Karen Reed, they have to trauma dump. I mean, it has not been nearly as long of a trial, but they're going to get in that room and they're all going to just trauma dump until they're wiped out from it. And we have all trauma dumped at one point in our life, and you know how just everything mentally, physically, emotionally exhausting that is. So they're going to trauma dump together. They're going to just word vomit all the things that they've wanted to say to each other for the last week and a half. And then they're going to go home, and then they're going to come back fresh in the morning. I think it's going to take them close to a full day of deliberations. There is a lot we've been going for almost an hour and a half talking this over. And we're all almost agreeing on these little bits. And so I think it's going to take them close to a full day. I think we have a verdict Wednesday evening around dinner time. I want to believe that the state has proved murder too. I'm not even going to say it. I believe that the state has proved murder too, but I could see a world where, like Jayson was kind of illustrating earlier, that they kind of split the baby and say he was a horrible person, but we're not sure that her story is completely viable, so we're going to go with the middle of the road charge. And it's literally going to be guilty of murder 2, guilty of lesser included manslaughter, not guilty. And I think they're going to, odds are better than good. They're going to mark that middle one and be at peace with that decision.
And Mike, I'll make my prediction when I find the temple on Mount Perennius above the Corinthian Sea, and I find the Oracle of Delphi, because I don't have it yet.
Okay.
What the heck, Jayson?
And so, Mike, what do you think? You think involuntary?
I am thinking manslaughter, and actually I agree with you. I think they might take a full day and find manslaughter.
Look at the friends again.
The longer it takes, the better off it is for her. If it comes back in less than 4 hours, she's gonna be guilty. I don't see it.
Okay. And to follow Lydia's lead, if I'm on the jury, I'm gonna be asking a jury instruction. Can we
Right. Give me the form. Give me the form.
Yeah. Can I vote for murder 1?
Right. Is there a death penalty? Like I would have said in Karen Reed. But again, that's just me as a juror. I'm not predicting an outcome. I'm just saying, me as a juror, it wouldn't take me very long. I might get a lunch out of it, but I'm done.
They don't get lunch.
They don't get fed.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Which I'm pro.
I don't know. Maybe during deliberations. Maybe during deliberations. I could see. Yeah, maybe. I could see him bringing in food during deliberations.
Maybe. But no, I don't know. But that's my Myers-Briggs. I'm just like, okay, all right. I already know what I think.
Okay. Let me end the recording. Let's hang out for one more minute. So thank you for all.
Let me thank you, Mike,
for this panel.
Us.
Yeah,
thank you.
See you.